Welcome to View of Two, the channel where we get to discuss all kinds of wonderful things, no?
Yeah. Sorry.
We are on day 89 of the official South African lockdown, straddling between level 2 and 3, whatever that means. Still no bars open, still no restaurants sitting down, still no gyms, so we banished to home gym.
For those of you,
for those of us who have
not one of those people.
Tenacity and see the benefits.
Okay.
Anyway, today we're going to be discussing the lockdown, the effects of the lockdown, why there is a lockdown, the bug, the legitimacy of this whole thing.
Yeah.
I think is a question.
Yes.
To us, we in our previous video identified our freedom as our identifier. If you haven't seen our previous video, the link's in the description below.
Yeah. Please
go and have a look at what we mean by how do we identify. So we identify firstly as free beings, and so this lockdown has had a huge effect on us, and it's popular vernacular would be it's triggered us.
Yeah.
And we're in the process of trying to process this and thought we'd do this on the camera.
Yeah.
We've done a bit of research. We'll be referring to notes, and by no means are we experts in the field of law or medicine or the Constitution, but we are
experts in our own views.
Yeah, on our own views, and we feel passionately about freedom.
Yeah.
We're going to be discussing the role of government in the scenario. We're going to be discussing the bug itself, how it's been perpetuated in the minds of the people. We're also going to be discussing our responsibility as citizens in South Africa and citizens of the world. So, Nan, take away your section.
Well, okay, it became my section when Hiram decided that he just didn't want to research in it. But also, to be fair, it was something that I was very, very passionate about. So part of the argument we're having is that the government imposed this lockdown. Did the government have the right to impose this lockdown, or did it not have that right? And this thought came to my attention when I was speaking to my cousin, and we're on different sides of this understanding, and his feeling was that the government had a right to do what it did and to what it did, talking about implementing the lockdown. Yeah. And so I kind of did a little bit of research, and I think we can all agree that in a republic, government's main duty, if not its sole duty, its main duty is to protect our rights as individuals. And one of the most fundamental rights, you find it under Section 1A of the Constitution, is freedom of movement and freedom of association. Both of these things were taken away by virtue of the lockdown. And so then my next question was, am I right to say that the government doesn't have any right to take this away? And of course the answer is no. There are times when the government will have to subvert, I don't know if that's the right word, those rights, and say, because we're doing this for a greater good, we're taking away those rights. And the research that I've done found that government can do this under two circumstances. The first circumstance is if we are under, or there's war being declared against us. That means that people are taking away our freedoms, people are taking away our rights, and people are trying to dissolve our government in some sort of way. Those people who are incredibly terrified of this bug might argue that this bug or the situations under this bug can constitute war. My argument, though, is, can you really say a bug, something
a non-living protein,
yes, is really declaring war on you? Is it trying to take away your rights? Is it trying to take away your freedoms? Is it trying to dissolve your government? Really? You know, my argument would be no, that's not the case. But if your argument is that it is, please, tell us how you think that's so. So after saying the bug wasn't trying to do it, the next thing was to try and see, can we say that citizens, your fellow South Africans, are trying to do that to you? If we were moving around, if we aren't wearing masks, are we trying to take away your rights? Are we trying to take away your freedom? Are we trying to dissolve this government? I don't think you can honestly look at people who are innocently walking down the street, not wearing masks, not staying at home and quarantining, that you can say that person is trying to take away your freedom as a citizen of South Africa. I don't even think...
Because of something the government said.
Yeah. It's... I honestly don't think you can sit and say that we are in the middle of a war. That argument for me just doesn't fly. So if it's not because we're in...
and you might say it's a metaphorical war, but it's not an actual war.
But even then, is it a war? Is someone really trying to take away your freedom? Is someone really going against your government and trying to dissolve that government, trying to impose themselves onto the government? I don't...
What about taking away your life?
I don't think that any person who's walking past is actively trying to take away your life. And certainly if they're asymptomatic, I don't think they're trying to do anything except for walk down the freaking street or wherever. So that's one. I don't think that we could have imposed this lockdown and said that it was because we are in the middle of a war. And luckily, South Africa didn't do that. The next time in which your rights can be revoked is if we declare a state of emergency, and that is what the government did. I think it's I'll find the law later. And so what the government said is, we're in a state of emergency, there's this bug going around, it is a problem for us as South Africans. We think that the majority of South Africans...
It's killing people.
Well, I didn't want to say that, but yeah, that's what it said.
That's what they said.
Because they declared a state of emergency, the government has the right to take away any and all of your freedoms to a certain extent and for a certain time period. They decide the extent of it. They decide the time period, as has been happening with this lockdown. There's two ways in which they can, or there are two things that they can do during a state of emergency. One is they can, I don't know if the word is correct, but they can invoke martial law. And when you invoke martial law, if invoke is the correct word, I don't know, is you have the army, armed forces, people with actual big guns and big
weapons.
Big weapons, right. And like big tanky cars. What are those called? Tanks. Are they tanks?
No, they're not. They're either Caspers or Rhinos or...
What is a tank then?
A tank is a very different thing, though. You usually have 2 or 3 guys in there shooting massive arsenal, and these carry people.
Okay, yes. So they had big army cars.
Okay.
Yeah, Caspers.
Either Caspers or Rhinos, or I don't know what they are now. I haven't been in the military for
a while.
25 years.
Thank goodness. So
30 years. Oh,
30
old. Years.
Old. So they had the army was in townships, and only in townships. If you know of them being in any other dwelling or place of living besides a township, please let us know. And that was part of the thing that irritated me, is why would you think that only people in townships need to have the presence of an army or the army, if you think the army should be there in the first place? Which obviously I didn't think we had to go that far.
But you raised an interesting point the other day, is they didn't need to be in the suburbs, because the suburbians, they locked themselves down completely. Just shackles on.
And also suburbia, why would you lock yourself down? Is something we're going to get to later. So also under martial law, you usually have a curfew, and you usually have the army having the right to enforce the law. What South Africa did, which I thought was very interesting, is they didn't say that we are under martial law. I remember the president, I think it was the president, I stand to be corrected, saying that although they've deployed the army, so to speak, the army is working to support the police, and they report to the police. And yet we had a curfew, which is something that we find in martial law, and we saw people in the army punishing people who weren't adhering to the strict lockdown rules. We saw people being made to do push-ups. We saw people being made to do all sorts of embarrassing things because the army told them to, without going to the courts, without any sort of legal, I forget the right word, but legal recourse. I think that's the word that they use. People were just being punished because the army felt that they could do that. And then the other thing that you can do when you declare a state of emergency is that you can revoke something called habeas corpus. Yes, I always trip on that word. Now, habeas corpus is your right to freedom. And when it's revoked, it means that the government can detain you without proper legal recourse. And they have the right to do that because they've declared a state of emergency. I argue, and I was telling Hiram that our habeas corpus was revoked because we were literally listening to the word locked down.
We were imprisoned.
Not only were we imprisoned, the government had the audacity to say we must imprison ourselves. Right? And then for some of you had the misfortune of having your neighbors perhaps call the police if you so much as breathe outside of your gate, unless you were what the government decided was emergency services. We didn't even get to vote what was an emergency service and what was not.
Or essential service.
Or an essential service. And so I said I promised I was going to come back. What the government used in order to be able to lock us down, so to speak, is they used Section 27 of the Disaster Management Act 57 of 2002. And what that does, it allows government to declare a state of emergency for 4 reasons, or one of 4 reasons. I'm sorry, my English is not working very well today. So it's either to prevent or reduce the risk of disasters, to mitigate the severity of disasters, it's for emergency preparations, and it's for rapid and effective responses to disasters. My question was this bug or the circumstances at the time in which we were under lockdown, could we really say it was a disaster? And in order for us to really unpack that, I asked Hiram how much he understood about this disease and how we got into lockdown. So I'm kind of, for the first time, we kind of handing things over to each other. So,
well, what is the bug?
Yeah.
And from the research that I've done, it's a variation of a bug that affects you in the range from a mild flu all the way up to a serious respiratory disease. And that's basically what it is. In the words of Bruce Lipton, it's a flu. It's a more serious flu.
Very serious
flu, but it is the flu.
Nonetheless.
The key with this one is that it hasn't been identified in humans before.
Oh, okay.
And so it's a little.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's a little more different.
Oh, you got that from me.
What that also means is that humans don't have an immunity against it. So it's a little more pervasive because it has that freedom to move without immunity. I think that what we need to understand is this really so worrisome?
Yeah.
So from about March, there was research done and comments made by professors from both Stellenbosch and from the University of Cape Town explaining the effects of a normal flu. So a normal flu usually affects mildly 10 million South Africans every year.
Jeez.
128,000 of those people are affected severely, and unfortunately 11,000 is the mortality rate. So 11,000 people are dying from that flu.
Which is a what percentage is it?
It's between 0.1 and 0.5% of the population. So what the research at that same time was proving was that this virus is actually, they felt it was killing at a stronger rate of up to 2%. So not 0.2, but up to 2%.
Oh.
So the question now is a serious threat? It's spreading like wildfire. The problem with viewing it like that is that if you take the ratio of people dying by people who are infected, you receive a percentage on a normal flu basis of 0.1 to 0.5.
Okay.
With this particular flu, it's slightly different in that when they did tests in Italy, for instance, they found that 50% of the people who carry the virus don't show symptoms.
Yeah.
So when you take that now and you divide the deaths by the number of people who have the actual virus, or the actual bug, I should say, you're looking at similar trends to a normal flu.
Yeah.
So the question is, why is there all this? What is the hype? What is the stress about?
Yeah.
What is the agenda? Why are they pushing this?
Is there an agenda?
Is there an agenda? Why are they pushing this as the first time in the history of flu seasons?
Yeah.
They're focusing on mortality rates. That's key to this thing. Why are they doing that?
Yeah.
Why do you think they're doing it? South Africa, why are they doing it?
And also, I mean, listening to what Hiram is saying, it doesn't seem death of anybody's death is a tragic thing, right?
No doubt.
So we're not trying to downplay that at all. We're not saying that it's not serious to do that, or that death is not serious.
But also another thing I forgot to mention was the key to this thing is how many people die and who are the people affected.
I was going to go there.
And that's the other subject we were talking about is it affects primarily the old people. So it has to do with the immune system. It affects primarily old people over the ages of 65, and it affects those who already have an immune deficiency disease.
And we also, I think it's important to point out that we knew that at the time that the government decided to implement the lockdown. So although we're 89 days into it, and people can always say the benefit of hindsight, at that time, the things that we knew for sure is that it attacked mostly old people. So if you were over the age of 60,
and it's the same as the flu virus.
Yeah.
60% of people who die of the flu virus are old people.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
For old people. But yes, so we knew at that time that it affected or killed, mostly people who were considered old. And we also knew that anybody who had a compromised immune system was mostly at risk. And we also knew, though, people forget that, we knew that people were recovering from this, right? We knew that if you were not considered very old, and if you didn't have a depleted, if I can use that word, immune system, that you could recover from this. And we also knew that South Africa, compared to Italy, because it was hearing the numbers in Italy that really, really got us freaked out.
Yeah.
South Africa has a relatively young population compared to Europe and the West.
We only have like 19%
old people, 19 to about 21%.
Yeah.
Again, please feel free to correct us in the comments below. So knowing what we did at that time, was it really right to implement the lockdown? Was it really right and correct to say that we were at that time under a state of emergency? Absolutely. Did the government have the right to say that? And if the answer is no, the question is, how did we as South Africans allow ourselves to be locked down? What was going on?
What's in our psyche?
What's in our psyche, yeah. And I think one of the things, if we're being honest, was to constantly have these numbers, as Hiram was saying, being told to you. You got scared.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
The other question I'd like, before we carry on with that, is the government said that the lockdown was to flatten the curve. Okay, and as far as I understand, flattening the curve means stopping progression.
Yeah. No more numbers
now
increasing.
It's coming out, everyone could get it. So is it flattening the curve, or is it everyone's going to get it? Do we have a herd immunity, which is what most of the world are saying is going to help? Yeah. Just having a herd immunity.
And Sweden has been saying that for the longest time. Yeah.
And so the other thing is, it only affects the population in colder areas, colder climates. So winter. Yeah. If the temperature is below body temperature, it thrives in that. So why are we now all of a sudden coming out of a shutdown
when we're in the middle of winter? Yeah.
So all of these questions have got me very confused about what the role or how the government's seeing the whole scenario.
Yeah.
But getting back to those who are affected by this bug, it's the old and it's the people who have compromised immune systems. Now, what is the role of the immune system? Now, Dr. Batar, a well-known surgeon from North Carolina, he has clearly stated that with a intact immune system, it's impossible to get ill. Even to get cancer, it's impossible. Wow. That's his standing on it. Okay. So that's how vital the immune system is. What is the role of the immune system? a slight biology lesson. The immune system is the system that protects the inside of the body. The adrenal system is the system that protects the outside of the body.
No, you're just trying to be fancy.
So the immune system and the adrenal system are always regulating what's most at risk. It's all about a fear indicator. So if I have the flu and a bear is chasing me, the immune system is going to constrict the blood vessels in the gut, send the blood to the peripheries, and get you the heck out of there, because the threat of the bear is far greater than the threat of the flu.
Yeah. Okay.
And so that immune system is being compromised at that moment to fight the flu, but it's prioritizing it over that because of the bear.
Okay. Yeah,
So
makes sense. That's the imminent threat.
How humans were initially designed was we only had really one fear when we were initially designed, and that was the fear of some animal attacking us. And it was usually a fleeting moment. So you'd have a few minutes of freaking out, and then your body would calm down and relax. And your immune system would then take over, and it would be defending you against any bacteria or bugs.
Huh.
So now, what's happened is we're being bombarded 24/7 by pictures of these beautifully high-resolution, computer-generated images, which, by the way, according to the young person who designed it, there we go.
You found the person who designed it?
Yes, I did. It was a they called medical illustrator from the CDC, who said this isn't a correct or an accurate depiction. It's purely illustrated.
Really?
Yes. And I was like, okay, well, it's there for the person on the street. So it's, if you have to look at the actual image of this blurry thing that looks like the virus, then you've got this. It looks alive. It looks like it's going to attack you. It wants to eat you.
Yeah, my mom was like, it just looks so scary.
So this thing is in your face 24/7. Wow, the numbers are there. Mortality rates
the whole time.
Yeah.
So many people in Italy died. So many people in China have died. So many people in the US are
100%.
dying.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
100,000 now have contracted the virus in South Africa. But the government's saying that everyone's eventually going to get it. Okay.
Yeah.
So why am I bringing this up? Is that fear causes the release of stress hormones in your body, and stress hormones cause the healing and the maintenance areas of your body, like the gut, to constrict and send the blood to the periphery, to the fight or flight, constantly. So what happens there is the immune system starts to suffer. There's a breakdown in its efficacy, and illness is rife in your system.
Okay.
Because you're constantly aware of this fear, this nebulous fear that's around you. So much so, I heard an interview about 2 weeks back. A guy phoned into a talk show, and they were discussing the effects of the bug. He said, my wife was so afraid. She had a panic attack where she had a heart attack and died.
Jeez.
That's the effect of this fear. She was so fearful of the bug.
So it wasn't even the bug that
It was the fear of the bug that caused this to happen.
That's really sad.
So that's how important it is that we realize that fear releases that stress hormone, which causes us to negate the immune system, and the adrenal system comes into play, and we're fighting something which isn't there.
But
and we're compromising
told,
compromising the system that's supposed to protect us from that. All right?
Yeah.
That's the key to this whole thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so the other thing that I found was interesting was, if you look at streaming services over the last few months, 79 movies, documentaries, etc., are now available on the streaming services, and they're all focused around the bug or a pandemic. The one that I noted mostly was the docu-series by Netflix called Pandemic, which was filmed and produced in 2019 and was released in January of 2020, just right in the middle of when the World Health Organization declared this a pandemic. And it speaks about a ubiquitous bug and a vaccine.
Yeah.
Which is a whole nother story.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the other thing is that what I wanted to talk about a bit was a psyop. And the official term for PSYOP is where did we find that here? Yes, here we go. It's an operation to convey selected information and indicators to audiences to influence their emotions, motives, and objective reasoning, and ultimately the behavior of governments, organizations, groups, and individuals. So we, I believe, are in the middle of a PSYOP here. Whether intended or not, whether government played a massive role in it or not, we are in the middle of a PSYOP. Our minds are being taught facts, so-called facts, which aren't necessarily there.
Yeah.
And the truth is being embellished for a purpose.
Can I just disturb you? I mean, I don't know if people, you are aware that doctors have been coming out saying that they've been told to declare that people have died of the bug. We can't use the word because we aren't allowed to.
Yeah, we'll be flagged.
So they've been you have to write that a person died of the bug even if they haven't. If you're not aware of that, please start looking at informing yourself. Yeah. We also are aware that certain hospitals and certain doctors have been given incentives to declare that people have got the bug even when they haven't. Our argument is not that the bug doesn't exist. We know that we are in the middle of a really terrible flu pandemic. We're not disagreeing with that. We're just saying, given how terrible it is, why are people being told to make it even more terrible?
Yeah.
What's going on? We know that this is a terrible bug. We know that it's killing individuals. We don't disagree, but it's clearly not to the level that we're being told, because if it was, then doctors wouldn't be told to declare that people are dying of a bug even when they themselves know that that's not happening. They wouldn't be given incentives to declare that people are suffering from this bug if it was as bad as we're being led to believe it is. And so that's why we think there might be something more going on.
Yeah. Behind the scenes.
We are not privy to these scenes, but it would seem that a lot more is going on.
But for me, it's about Occam's razor again, no?
Yeah.
Being that the simplest answer is usually
the most correct
answer.
Yeah, I think, so what we've been doing with the first half of this was to just try and give you certain facts, not all of them.
Food for thought.
Yeah, but now it's really, really time to have a conversation. Is how did this lockdown really happen? How did we allow ourselves to be locked down?
Yeah.
For me, when we were first told we were going to go on lockdown, so to speak, and that we couldn't move, I was like, this can't be right. The information that we've been given does not justify me not being allowed to earn a living.
100%.
It doesn't justify it. That's what I thought at the time. I think that more so now, 89 days down the road. I also felt freedom is such an important thing.
It's integral.
Yeah. How could I allow that to just be taken away from the flimsy evidence that I've been given as far as the South African context is concerned? And so it really, really got to me. But what was shocking for me is how many people bought into this.
What I've been thinking of is, along those lines, is you can be immunized from the illness, the bug. How is your business immunized?
Yeah.
I own 4 businesses and a B&B, and I have had no income for the last 3 months. Very, very little. That was residual coming from previous work, but no income. How many people have been affected like that? How many people are now battling the bug of a depressed economy, an economy that was on a gurney being pushed towards the hospital and is now on life support?
Yeah.
Where do we come out of this? Yeah. And it has only been exacerbated by a reactionary measures from, I feel, very, very diluted information, personally, uninformed information, and hyperbolized statistics. That, for me, was what infuriated me when I saw what we were doing to ourselves by allowing a capricious government to shut us down.
Big words there.
to hold us back from our freedom to move freely in the community, to earn an income, to speak with someone else, to make a deal, to
hug, to touch, to be ourselves.
Yeah, it infuriated me. I eventually had to just take a week off, just calm down, meditate, align, because as I said in my previous video, I believe in being led by my inner being, which is my guide, and be able to come to peace with our future on a spiritual level.
I go in and out of peace, I'm not going to lie.
No. On a spiritual level, I'm at peace, but on an economic level, I can see the writing on the wall. The statistics came out yesterday for the first quarter of the year, between 30 and 39% unemployment from the first quarter. What on earth is it going to be now as we're entering into the sort of the back end of the second quarter? What's going to happen?
Yeah.
Where are the figures going to take us?
And also, before we even go to where we're going to, how have you people been able to deal with 89 days of being locked down, not being allowed to move? How has it affected you already, mentally, emotionally, spiritually? How have you coped or not coped? What have you done? That's something we really would like to know and to understand and to talk about. I know a friend of mine who couldn't go home. I'm not going to say her name either. She's in Cape Town. Her family is in Joburg, and she had to quarantine by herself, and she was really, really losing her mind, and she was stressed, because she could also see that she was likely to not have her job back once this lockdown is over, whenever that is. And how, for most people, how are you going to be able to employ every single person that you employed before? Another thing I'd like to know, we were talking about it a little bit with Hiram, is how many of you have had support from the government?
Oh yes, you didn't even touch on that.
Yeah, how many of you?
The wonderful stimulus that was going to come our way.
Can you not be so sarcastic?
No, I've got to be sarcastic, man.
How many of you have had the UIF that the government said it was going to help you with? How many of you have applied for loans for your business? For those of you who got it, how many of you got it? For those of you who didn't get it, are you aware that the loans are loans? Right?
Yes, they're not a stimulus.
They're not a stimulus as such. They're not a free handout. How many of you were able to keep your staff during this lockdown, and how many of you had to let some of your staff or all of your staff go? How many of you have been able to keep your businesses? How many of you have lost your businesses? How many of you are aware of what you're going to do immediately? How many of you are freaking out and wondering what your next step
How many
is?
of you are in that fear cycle?
Yeah. How many of you, despite all of this, think that the lockdown was correct? How many of you have always wondered about the lockdown? And I think one of the things that we have to say, especially for South Africa, I can't speak for those wonderful people from around the world who will be watching, but how many of you can be honest and say this lockdown happened to us because we chose for it to happen? And for those who say that we didn't choose for it to happen, I'd like to know, what did you do? How did you fight against the lockdown if you felt that you needed to fight against it? How many of you informed yourselves and went out to do research to say, okay, I hear what this doctor is saying. There are other doctors out there who are saying the opposite thing. What are they saying about it? I feel like I'm talking too much.
And then another thing is, how many of you decided that you were going to act on your own? You were going to decide for yourself, I'm going out. I'm going to do these things. Whether I end up in jail, whether I end up being tortured, my freedom is more important to me than being imprisoned.
Yeah, but how many of you, and this is a really interesting one. So for us, as Hiram had explained, freedom as individuals is the most important thing. But looking at what happened worldwide, but certainly here in South Africa, clearly freedom is not the most important.
It appears not that it's not a high priority.
It's not a high priority.
Yeah. Security is.
Yeah, for some of you. And I'd really like to know, for those who say security is the most important thing, and that's fine as well. We're not
here to judge. We're just here to give an opinion.
And also to get your opinion. How many of you feel that this lockdown was correct? How many of you feel that, given what we knew at the time, this was the only way in which we could respond to it? I don't think so, but we'd like to hear from you.
Yeah.
How many of you feel that despite what's going to happen, the repercussions of this lockdown were necessary? For those who feel otherwise, we'd also like to know what you think could have happened. And going out of this, before I forget, it was something that we had spoken about previously. I really hope that the news people are as adamant about reporting the result of the lockdown as they have been about reporting about the cases of this bug. I would like the news, if they really consider themselves to be people of any sort of integrity in reporting about what this lockdown has done, because it isn't the bug. It wasn't the bug that made you lose your business. It wasn't the bug that caused you to perhaps lose your job. It wasn't the bug that stressed you. It was the reporting and it was the lockdown. Are news anchors going to give us the numbers of the businesses that have been lost? Of people...
Suicide.
Okay. Suicide is one of them.
That's a real thing.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
Of people...
Starvation.
Who have starved, who've been homeless. How many homes are lost? How many cars are lost? How many assets have been repossessed or had to be sold because of this lockdown? We're so happy to talk about numbers in South Africa. Those are the numbers that we also need to talk about. And if news anchors are not willing to talk about those numbers and put them up as constantly as they've been doing as far as this bug is concerned, then we really have to question the type of news that we receive.
100%.
Is how I feel about this. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit personal there.
My feeling is that there is an antidote to the fear, and that is love. I feel that we are beings who were created from a source of love, and in the mess of this life we seem to lose that perspective.
I agree.
If we can just understand that we are powerful creators, and that we, through our thoughts and our beliefs and our expectations, create our lives. And if we are able to segregate ourselves a little bit from all of the rhetoric around us and take a little bit of time to get into that quiet space, whether you're religious or not, it's got nothing to do with religion. It's got to do everything with your inner guidance and your inner peace. You will find miracles occurring in your life which you won't be able to explain. And that is my conclusion message to this whole thing, is that we are creative beings. We have the ability to choose, and we are free.
Yeah. And it's to say, for those of us who are frustrated, we don't have to be stressed, unduly stressed. As Hiram is saying, there is a way out of this. And there's life, there's joy after all of this. And it's important to concentrate on that in order to be able to create. Because if we don't, then they win. And there's no reason to.
That immune system is part of a system in your gut which is creative. And the moment you are stressed and fearful, as I said, that it compresses and pushes all that creativity out of your creative zones and into your periphery, and you then are left onto the outcome of this world.
Yeah.
This is the world of creation. This is the world of the 3D experience. Yeah.
All of this is new to me in South Africa, but I am listening and learning. But so we really just wanted to have a view on this lockdown. We've spoken about it for a while, and we thought we might as well share our thoughts with you. And we'd like to hear from you and to have a conversation like we always do. And if there are other things that you'd like us to touch on, please let us know. We're happy to talk about it.
Great stuff. Well, hopefully by the next time we see you and speak to you, it'll be all of this will be out of the way, and we'll be living our lives not in a new normal or new speak, but in freedom.
There we go.
Back to freedom.
Look at you. Yeah.
Thanks, folks. Please remember to subscribe and hit the bell notification for more updates. And thank you for spending the last 40 minutes with us.
Yeah.
Take
Happy
care.
day.
Bye.
Bye.